Assistant Director of the Moravian Archives for the Southern Province, as our honored guest. She will present a program on the mapping of the American expansion, expanded with information on utilizing the map collection at the archives. Please welcome her here. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sabrina Garrity, and I am the Assistant Director of the Moravian Archives. Thank you guys for having me here today. I appreciate it, and it's lovely to be back. The last time that I was here was with Megan O'Riordan a year ago? It was a while ago. We forgot where this was. We had to Google it. So I'm glad to be back, and we are also bringing with us today Samantha Tellis, who is our new research archivist. I don't think that she was working with us at the time that we came here last. So we're glad to all be here today and present for you guys. So this presentation I actually gave the first time for the MESDA MAP seminar earlier in October. However, that was a really jam-packed schedule. I'm like the youngest person out of everybody that was presenting, so they gave me the 20-minute slot after lunch. So I'm giving you guys the full version of the presentation, not the abridged version. So I hope that you guys ate earlier and aren't in the nappy sleep time mode that everyone was last time. But this presentation of the places they couldn't go, mapping what they didn't know, is all about the overview of traveling to North Carolina from Bethlehem and the surveying party that came here in August of 1752, that whole fall. So the surveys from this trip were completed by a man named William Churton, who we'll introduce in a minute, and those are what helped us to form our knowledge of the frontier of North Carolina. At the time, this was the Wild West, truly. So August Spangenberg, who I'll mention in just a minute, said something to the effect of, "There is no map in North Carolina that is now at all correct, for it has all changed so much since passing into the hands of the king, so some 20 years ago." So when they came here, they are leaving from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and they don't know where they're going. Truly kind of hard to imagine to just not know what was past any of this. But why they chose this place is because North Carolina was frankly relatively cheap for land at the time, honestly. That was a huge part of this. But also the Moravians were seeking a place that they could go to have a utopia, if you will. A place where Moravians could go and create a community for themselves, a place that they would not have as much outside influence in. And so they selected Western North Carolina as a place that they could do this. And part of that was because, yes, it was cheap land. A lot of that is because of the geography of the area. So in Virginia, there's a lot of deep rivers, and it's easy to import and export goods. But here in North Carolina, particularly and where we are in North Carolina, there's not as many rivers that you can get all the way from the coast all the way into here with large barges of items on. So this was part of it. Also, North Carolina at the time was a little swampy. It doesn't seem like that whenever you're driving around today. On my way over here, I was actually reflecting on that and thinking, we really have done a lot since then. But if you're ever driving on Salem Parkway going through Kernersville towards Greensboro, there's that one swampy area. And that's what I like to imagine all of this looked like at the time. So really, truly not ideal. But they decided that they would come here. And so when they made this plan, they talked to Lord Granville, who at the time was in charge of basically half of North Carolina. And he said, "That's great. Go out and survey what you want and then come back and tell me." So these are the men that go on this trip. So over here, we've got August Gottlieb Spangenberg. He's affectionately called by all of his friends Brother Joseph. And so I'm going to call him that too, because that's a lot to say in one whole name. So he was born in 1704 in Germany, and he actually became a Lutheran minister first. And then at the age of 33-ish, he started working as a professor and a superintendent of an orphanage, and that is how he met the Moravians. And then he decided to join them in 1733, and after the death of Count Zinzendorf much later, he actually became the leader of the Moravian Church. But about 20 years, 25-ish years before what we're talking about, he brought the Moravians to Georgia. They wanted to settle in Savannah. And now that is a much shorter trip from the coast than what we're talking about today, but that was at the time pretty uncharted territory. It was quite new in Savannah. So this was a very interesting thing for a man from Europe to come over and do with people that he had met maybe like 3-5 years before. That's a really short amount of time to be, hey, I'll go on a 2-month-long voyage and start a new colony in somewhere completely new that I've never been to, in a place where they don't speak my language. So, quite an adventurer. And I'll be honest, this is not really the guy that I would pick to go hiking with, but this is the guy that they are using as their leader. Timothy Horsfield was another person who accompanied them, and he was actually from Long Island, so I like to really imagine that he was bringing accent and flavor into this group too. And he joined the Moravians in 1749. So also a quick jump to meet these people and decide, hey, I'm on board to go on a crazy long road trip with you. Joseph Mueller was the doctor of this group, so he spent 6 years in Europe studying medicine, and this becomes really vital, no spoilers yet. And Herman Loesch was the only one in the party who actually settled in North Carolina for any amount of time. The rest of these people stayed for less than a year whenever they were first setting up, but they did not actually spend time and stay there and build homes. Henry Antes is the man that you want in your pioneer life. He's the person that you want to have whenever you are going out into the wilderness, because he is the one that was in charge of the building, the farming, all of the manufacturing operations he was on top of. So this is the guy that's like Mr. Fix-It. So they really wanted him to be there because he was the one that was going to be able to tell them if the land that they were going to settle on was arable. Is there enough timber here to actually support the size of a community that you need? And so when we're looking at this, there are a few other people that come on board a little bit later. So William Churton, he is the Surveyor General for Lord Granville. So almost all of the original surveys of North Carolina from this time period come from William Churton. I would venture to say that in our archives we have over 100 that are done by him. He is not technically a true map maker. He does get involved in some map making projects, but he is not someone that is associated with a lot of bigger projects. And then we have two other people. There's an unnamed hunter. I guess they didn't find that important to give him a name in this story. And then there's a hunter and a guide, but it's very important to note that even though they don't name him, they do throw him under the bus as being the one that gets them lost later. So these gentlemen all start off, and these men up here all start off in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And so they leave on August 25th of 1752 on horseback. And I mentioned earlier Henry Antes, and this is just a bad omen for what's going to happen on this trip. Henry Antes doesn't leave with the rest of the men because he has an attack of gallstones. And then he goes on a horseback riding trip that's about 400 miles just to get to where they're going to start in North Carolina. But he met up with them the next day. So he knew what he was doing, I guess, and more the power to him. It takes a lot of boldness to do something like that. This map that we're looking at right now is by Thomas Kitchen, and I am actually using this map to show you the path of the journey that they go on. This is a much later map, though. This is about 30-ish years after they're here, but this shows us all of the features that we can use to kind of give us a time and place of where everything is. So on this map, I'm going to point out a few things. So we've got these 3 blue lines right here, and those are rivers. So this is the New River right here, and this is the Catawba River, and then we have the Yadkin River right here. Now, important to note that the New River actually flows this way and would take you all the way up over here to like Ohio, if you followed it. And these are the fingers of the Catawba River, and I'll talk about those in just a moment. So, on September 10th, they land over here in Edenton. So they came all the way from Bethlehem to Philadelphia, then they rode down the Chesapeake Bay, they took a boat over the Chesapeake, and then they rode again all the way to Edenton. So about 400 miles. So that's a pretty long journey. So they arrived there about 15 days after they left Bethlehem, and they're here for about a week in Edenton. And during that week, the hurricane of 1752 hits. This is before we named them, so I don't have a fun name to give to you. But it was called the most violent and terrible hurricane that was ever felt in this province, wrote a man named Printer Peter Timothy in Charleston. In Charleston alone, which was a much larger city than Edenton, there was a loss of nearly 24 boats in the harbor and 500 buildings were destroyed. This was a massive, devastating hurricane. And while you're thinking Charleston's pretty far away, I want you to keep this in the back of your mind, because as all of the hurricane came in, it was coming in this way with all of the rain. So on September 21st, they have left Edenton and they arrive at the home of John Salas, where everyone but Mueller becomes sick with a really high fever. This is a malarial fever. And while they're there for about a week or so, a second cyclone hits the Carolina coast. And this is already waterlogged ground. Brother Joseph wrote that fences, bridges, and whole houses were washed away, livestock drowned, and the rivers overflowed their banks. And I did want to note about this that a note after the journey says that the Roanoke River rose 25 feet that week. And according to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the highest that they have ever had on record since they have started keeping score of this is 23.4 feet, which happened in November of 1985. So this is truly devastating levels of flooding that's happening, and it's happening all over the Carolinas. And this is important to note because they're deciding to come and move here. And this is essentially what has happened with Hurricane Helene, and he truly does predict that this will happen again, and what he writes about the topography of the land. So despite all of this, they press on. But they have to leave behind Timothy Horsfield with Mueller, his nurse, at a man named Captain Sennett's house, which was just a day away from John Salas. They are too sick to continue on. They have been very, very ill. At this point, they've all tried to leave several times. Brother August actually faints whenever he is trying to ride his horse away. They are incredibly ill with this malarial fever, and it will actually plague Henry Antes for the rest of his life. So from here, they explore southwest to the Catawba River, where they stay at the home of a man named Andreas Lambert, and he is noted as being a Scotsman. So they arrive here on October 28th, and they are going to go from here to explore the Little River. But I want you to make note that they left Edenton on September 10th, and they're getting there on October 28th. So that's how much they've been delayed by the illness and by all of this devastating flooding that's happening that's made everything impassable here. So then from here, they go on to explore the Little River and all of these areas right up here. So they intend to go from the Little River right here to the Yadkin River. But Brother Joseph describes that things go awry. In mid to late November, they had been exploring the Three Forks here, and on November 29th, they had intended to head to the Yadkin, but instead ended up on a new river after missing Mulberry Gap. And you can't see on here, but Mulberry Gap is essentially one of these little passes right here. So they should have gone from this fork over, but they got mistaken, went up here, and they caught the new river right here. And then they're on the new river, but they think that it's the Yadkin River. They don't know that they're wrong, because there's not road signs yet. Google Maps isn't there to tell you, hey, recalculating, let's turn around. So Brother Joseph describes that things start to go awry, and there is no way out of this one area that they go into because they are stuck climbing an indescribably high mountain, which is most likely near Blowing Rock. So just think about that for a minute, how far off base we are from trying to be a little bit further west than we are right now to being in Blowing Rock. So the horses have to be unsaddled, and they have to take all of the gear off of the horses, all of their supplies, everything. They have to drag their gear behind them while they themselves are walking on all fours as they scale these cliffs. And on top of this, there's nowhere for these horses to graze. So this is starting to get quite dire. And at this point, they still think that they are on the Yadkin River. They haven't quite figured it out yet. And if you thought that that was bad, it's gonna get worse. So still lost, they find a meadow and make camp just in time for a snowstorm, because it is now winter. This area, if you're not familiar with like the Boone, Banner Elk, Blowing Rock area, is known for having incredibly high winds sometimes and very cold winter temperatures. Referring back to NOAA, Grandfather Mountain has recorded wind speeds of 121 miles per hour, and in 1985, a record low of -32 degrees. Brother Joseph describes the storm as so strong, he could not stand up, and the water by the fire froze solid. He had never experienced anything so cold in his life. And this is a man that is from the mountains of Germany, actually, so he is used to quite cold weather, much colder weather than we typically have here. So this is a horrific thing that is happening to them, and they are all recognizing that they are near death. So they realize that things are going wrong, and finally Brother Joseph says, we're not listening to you anymore. We're walking due east. We're walking due east, I don't care where we end up, but they finally come out of the mountains and they find a meadow the horses can graze, because the horses have not had anything to eat either in this whole time. So this is a really bad situation for them to be in. So they head due east, and they finally make it to the Yadkin River, and they describe it as a hallelujah moment, if you will. So on December 14th, they make their camp there on the river, and they found their way out of the Blue Ridge, but Antes has suffered a really terrible cut on his arm, which has gotten frostbite and an infection into it. This is the guy who started the trip with the gallstones, if you remember. So like this really just hasn't been his fall winter year. But they are in the right area now, so things are looking up. And this is where they actually start doing surveys of what will become Wachovia. At this point, they've been taking all of these surveys of all of this area, some knowing that, no, this isn't where we want to be, and we know where we are. And then later, some, we have no idea where we are, and we won't end up using these either way. So they hang out in this area for quite some time. They're here on January 8th. They make camp in the Three Forks of Muddy Creek, which is the area that we will come to know as Wachovia later. And I do have some maps over here for you guys to look at to see exactly where they were. So in the time they've surveyed the area, and they find that it's actually going to work for them. And part of the reason why they decide to name the Wachovia tract with that name Wachovia, it's not for the bank, that comes later, is because it means lands of creeks. It is actually the ancestral home of Count Zinzendorf, who was at the time the leader of the Moravian church. So this was an homage to him, who had imagined this utopia, who had really footed the bill for a lot of this as well. And it is something that is reflective of this area. I don't know if you guys grew up in backyards with a whole bunch of creeks, but I definitely did. I feel like there's so much water in this area, and it is truly one of the places where you can see how much this would be useful for people to come into if they had nothing established. There's a lot of fresh water, there's arable land, there's plenty of timber. While sometimes it's hilly, it's overall not too crazy. They weren't having to climb up any cliffs and drag things behind them to get there. So this was a very good place for them to settle. So they remain here until mid-January, and then they swing by John Salas's house over here, and they go check on Horsfield and Mueller. They left them behind in September, y'all. So the party stops there, but they had already headed back to Pennsylvania only 2 weeks prior. So I just want you to imagine, though, that you are not expecting these people to come to your house, and then there's like 9 of them, and then 2 of them stay through the holidays, like from Labor Day until after, like till today. I would never open up my door again. Just wouldn't do it. On January 25th, they report that they have left North Carolina and are in Lunenburg County, Virginia, on their way home. And they arrived there on February 12th, 1753, making it 5.5 months, 171 days total. So imagine just being on a journey that doesn't really have quite a destination that's put on a map, and that the destination is moving. The destination is nebulous for them, of where are we trying to be. They had a vague idea that they wanted to be past this area, and they wanted to be over here, but they truly did not know what was out here for them and where they would like to try to settle and what they wanted to survey for this. But I do like to think that if they had just stayed straight on I-40, they would have made it so much faster. So, just a little recap of our journey here. So, there's been 2 record-setting hurricanes with devastating flooding. And this is all happening while they are without proper rain jackets. Remember, this is early, so you're on horseback. All of the food that you are going to eat, you either have to bring with you or you have to catch it and kill it yourself. They contracted a malarial fever. They get extremely lost. They complain about Churton being a buzzkill the whole time. Brother Joseph literally makes lists about how he is delighted by things or upset by things. And as someone who is a list maker myself, I truly resonate with that. But there's literally a list about all of the things that he does not like about William Churton. Mostly about his surveying practices, but I do think that there's maybe just a personality conflict overall. They also could have just gone straight. There's a blizzard and a windstorm, near starvation, dehydration for men and horses, and there's not even a Bojangles in sight on this trip through North Carolina, and that's the worst part. So, despite all of this, Joseph writes, when we reached the top of the mountains, we saw mountains to the right and to the left. Before us and behind us, many hundreds of mountains rising like great waves in a storm. And that's what you're looking at in this picture. This is taken by the National Park Service from an overlook on the Blue Ridge Parkway near Blowing Rock. And if you would like to go visit it, you do not have to go on horseback. You can drive about 2 hours and you'll hit there. But ever the optimist, despite all of these things, Brother Joseph recognizes the opportunity of the utopia here, and he is truly a positive outlook, has a positive outlook. So he also records details about the wildlife in the land, detailing the buffalo, the deer, the elk, and the wolves in the area. And he writes, the wolves here give us music every morning from 6 corners at once, such music as I have never heard. Which kind of gave me deja vu, and I was like, where have I heard that before? I don't know if you guys remember this movie. No? Bram Stoker's Dracula? Come on, what sweet music they made. So, I am going to show you guys some of these surveys that William Churton made. So, many of these, as I mentioned, were actually not areas that they end up settling in, and not even really truly close to where they would eventually be at. But I want to show you through these because they're quite beautiful. Now, it is important to note that we don't have his original survey notes, Churton's. These are surveys that he is drawing up from notes. These are cleaned up. These are done probably on a desk somewhere. Very nice, because this is way too clean for what we would see for something done on site. But this one over here, this is depicting the headwaters of the Little River, so where it showed you those 3 branches of the Catawba. And this one over here is the South Forks of that. And this one here, C, is the Catawba River as well, and the Little River, but a broader view of it on this side, so this is much more expanded out. But there's true artistry in how he is doing this, and you'll note, and Brother Joseph complains about this, that whenever he was doing his surveys, he would do 3 lines, but then he wouldn't connect the 4th line, and that very much bothered him. And he also wouldn't do smaller tracts of land. He would only do these large swaths. And what Brother Joseph and the other Moravians wanted was to have these smaller surveys so that they could pick more of the land, kind of cut everything off, not just one giant block, but also so that they could portion things out ahead of time for people that would be interested in investing in some of this land. And when you're only doing 3 lines of a survey, you're just hoping that it connects back. And while it does make sense, as long as all of your calculations are correct, it was really saving William Churton time. Because in order to make these surveys, You didn't have the luxury of like a tape measure. Essentially what you would do is you would take a pole and then you would use a compass and then you would direct that compass in whatever direction you would need off of that pole, and you would attach it's called a chain, but it's usually about 60 to 80 feet. And you would take that chain, line it up, make sure it's right, stick another pole in, and then you've got to walk back, and then you've got to get the first pole, and then you've got to drag the chain that way, and then you've got to do that. And how they would keep up with that is they would put little sticks in their pockets to count for how many chains that they had gone through. So you're really relying on making sure that you counted correctly, that all of your measurements were right, that you're still going in the right direction when you are only doing 3 lines of that survey. Otherwise, you could be wrong by a significant amount and not know it. So confidence in himself, I would assume, is perhaps one of his personality flaws that perhaps Joseph didn't like. So these E and F are also of the Catawba and Little Rivers, and so are these over here. And I do like that he draws little mountains in here. Nice little touches on this. And usually what he would base these surveys on, the first line of the survey, is either a previous survey that he has done. They would sometimes use markers from trees, like specific large trees that they would use, other things like that. But because they were doing this on the road, unlike when they actually settled here in Wachovia, they would not be putting down survey stones or any permanent marker for themselves. These J and K are of the Yadkin River and the Mulberry Fields. So over here you can see where we've got the Yadkin and Mulberry Fields. So this is a little bit further west of us than where we are right now. And then this larger survey is of the 3 forks of Muddy Creek. So we've got Middle Fork right here, South Fork, and North Fork. So this is pretty much what ends up becoming the actual Wachovia tract later, with some adjustments along the way. So through all of this, what I want you to know is that 171 days, once they get back, I'm sure that they probably took a few days to recover, relax. But then Brother August has to go all the way to Europe to make these claims, and he has to go on a very long adventure from there to make these purchases, to settle all of these debts, to make everything work. So his journey continued from here. And it was later that year in 1753 that they actually begin their settlement here. But I want you to note that this whole time, like a whole year, is actually very short comparatively for what this could have been in terms of the project that they're taking on, of going to survey this land, of finding it, of securing investors in Europe, of coming back and purchasing it from Lord Granville, and then sending people out here to settle. So in all this, I think it's nice to note that they went all the way over here, all the way up here, and this is where they ended up being. So this is a good depiction of where the Mulberry Fields and 3 Forks of Muddy Creek are. And this map by John Collett was finished in 1770 and heavily relied on some of the surveys that were completed by William Churton and by others. But you can really see a difference between this and some of the earlier maps that we saw in this, where all of the areas of North Carolina are they just draw mountains, or they'll draw trees. Maybe they'll put the cartouche, this is a cartouche, maybe they'll put it up here just to cover up the area where they don't know where anything is. That's a common map making feature that you'll see. We don't know what's there, that's where we'll put our name. So this is a huge development in map making and the understanding of the topography of North Carolina, and also for the Moravians themselves to actually pick a place to settle that will be a utopia for them, that they will build Salem in. And this is just a really lovely way to kind of acknowledge the effort that goes into map making. It's easy for us to forget about that whenever we just type into Google Maps how to get somewhere. This is a huge endeavor and requires a lot of walking, a lot of knowledge, a lot of understanding of your environment and how to navigate. So I think it's just a nice little way to acknowledge them. That story kind of feels a little reflective of this, and it's truly just a tale as old as time that a road trip goes awry. So thank you very much for this, and if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Yes.
2 slides back when you had the, yes,
Mhm.
where, I think I might know, but, so it's 3 Forks, but now they're called Salem Creek, and where is Old Salem?
So
in
Old
that?
Salem, don't quote me on it exactly, but it's like roughly right around here. And I do have some maps over here where you can actually see where it is compared. I have an image of this map, and then I have others where you can actually see Bethabara, Bethania, all of the settlements and different people's land. But it's roughly, yeah, right around there-ish. So what we're looking at here, this is going to be like the topmost part of it, and they end up not quite getting as much here. They got a little bit more land over here and a little bit further over. So this isn't exactly, they end up kind of negotiating a little bit further on the actual land that was purchased in the different tracts. Yes?
I've got a couple of questions.
Mhm.
How much do they end up paying for this tract?
So that is a question that I will answer for you in a minute after I look it up, because I don't know off the top of my head, but I know that it is 98,000 acres. And I will tell you exactly how much that was in a minute, because I don't want to tell you wrong.
Was there anybody there before? I mean, were there
So there were some
inhabitants
people.
of this area when they explored it and decided it was theirs?
So when they come here originally, there are not very many people living here. Obviously, there are indigenous people that have been here for a while. So when we say uncharted, unexplored territory, that means for white people. But for this, there were a few interactions that they had with Cherokee, who were mostly at this point to the west of the Yadkin River. But in Bethabara, there was actually a hunting cabin that was there. So the reason why they end up establishing Bethabara as a town is not because they just loved the scenic views there. There was actually a structure, and they ended up staying there on that surveying trip. So it's a 1-room cabin, and all of these gentlemen are slammed in there, and it's really cold. And later, when they come back in 1753 with the party that will actually set up in this area, they are all there, and only one of them thought to bring a hammock. So he's sleeping above like 10 people, and that's just a little tidbit that I love to imagine. But it was on a path for trading, so that was a reason why they decided to settle there. But there were not very many people there overall, and no one at that point had surveyed and purchased tracts of land that they were still settled on from Lord Granville or any of the previous lords or governors.
Well, how did they go about dividing it? Once they decided this is it, we're coming, how did they then split up?
From there, from like the Moravians. So what the idea was is because they knew that there was a lot of economic risk in coming out here, people would purchase tracts of lands. So they could purchase or they could work that debt off. And this becomes a problem later on with the Revolutionary War, actually. But what they were doing is they were operating under an economy that was shared. So if you were a tailor, they would say, great, you have a purpose, we're gonna have you come out here, we're gonna set you up with a shop, and that way if there's any economic blowback, it's going to be cushioned by this economy that is shared here. So it's a communal system. So they would have been able to go out and purchase these. So when Reuter comes a little bit later, a few years after this, he actually sets about resurveying that whole 98,000 acres, which is a massive undertaking, especially for a man who is disabled. He had a broken foot whenever he was a child and had a broken arm that never healed properly. So this man is having to go out there with a significant disability. But they would make these large tractus maps, of which we have the set of 4 originals, and they made duplicates of these. So those duplicates went to Herrnhut, they went to London, they went to Bethlehem, they went all over for people to be able to see what was there. And I like to refer to those as Zillow Beta, because you could see what's there, and he also drew in all of the information about the trees that were there, the kinds of vegetation, and also the land, how the floodplains worked and how the runoff would go, so that you could actually see all of this. And that is because of what Brother August Spangenberg actually told them in this, is that this is a dangerous place to be if there's a lot of water. So they would be able to look at that, pick their lot of land, and then they would survey it, write to them, and then all of those sets of maps would be updated. So a lot of letters.
I got your price.
Yes, thank you.
So they paid a down payment of 500 pounds, which I looked it up, that would be about $39,000 today. And then annual quit rents of 148 pounds, 9 shillings, and 2.5 pence. I don't know how long they paid those quit rents
They
though.
paid the quit rents for quite some
Yeah.
time, and then things changed after the Revolutionary War, and he, Frederick William Marshall, had to go through a process of naturalization so that they could actually keep the land, and that was a huge risk that they were worried about, which is one of the reasons why they remained neutral during the Revolutionary War. But thank you for that. Yes?
White Wagon Road somewhere in here?
Yes, so you can actually see it. I'm not sure if this one actually includes it, but okay, so it would be running from right about under here, going up this way. And on some of those that I have over here, you can actually see it in detail. But it ran kind of south underneath Pilot Mountain and through. So very close to where they were, and significant for them for sure. Yes?
A map that I know we have put down at the archives, but it's just after this, and it's unfortunate. The Fry Jefferson map, very
Yes.
famous map.
Mhm.
Thomas Jefferson's dad, Peter, was
Mhm.
one of the people that surveyed it. And it came out right about the time these guys were doing the trip.
Yes.
I'm not sure when.
It came
that
out
might
in
be taken into the
1751.
Moravian possession,
Mhm.
But it was awful
So
close.
close.
And it had the Great Wagon Road.
Yes, it does have the Great Wagon Road on it.
The other thing that's interesting about that survey map of Wachovia, where it's split, it goes back to how it was financed.
Mhm.
Because if you look at the record from Moravians online, those tracks kind of parallel the investors that are loaning large amounts of money to
Yeah.
Moravians to buy this place.
Mhm.
A lot of them just gave it back. But
Mhm.
we had a fellow who came from the country of Latvia,
Mhm.
who was doing a TV show for the Latvian TV network about a Moravian Latvian, the wealthiest man in Latvia
Mhm.
in the 18th century, who loaned money so that the Moravians could buy this
Mhm.
parcel in the same.
Yes, there was a lot of different investors in this, and Count Zinzendorf is obviously the one that we note the most because of his involvement with the Moravian Church. But there was a lot of interest in moving out of Europe at this time. While persecution religious had been going on for many centuries, this was still ongoing at this point, and there was a lot of political unrest in the areas that they were occupying. The Fry Jefferson is a great example of a map that happens right before this. It's actually a map of Virginia. So you see the Virginia line, and it just shows just past where we are. Like, I feel like it would just scrape off the top of like Davidson County if you were to have the actual counties on there. But our copy of it is the first state of that map. And you can tell that it's the first state because in later states of the map, they actually engraved the Wachovia tract into it. And on this date, someone took a little pencil and drew a square and wrote Wacow. So they wanted to make it known for themselves. But that was actually printed just before this journey that they went on. But later editions do include this and actually relied on some of the surveys that were done by Churton to fill in the areas about the New River, et cetera, in this part that they actually do go through. Any other questions for me? All right, well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And over here on this table, I have 2 books that are out. The book that's larger is actually a bound book of Reuters surveys, so smaller little maps of his. Those are originals that you're welcome to look through and flip through. And then the smaller book over here is a laminated copy of August Gottlieb Spongenberg's diary. Some of that is in English, not all of it though, but I do have a translated copy of his actual field notes from his journey and then some different maps from the area. Please feel free to look at those as well.
Thank you so much.